This is the golden question. Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 17 of the Golden Question podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be answering the question, how is debt bad for the free market? Now, I'm also going to be talking in broader terms and how debt is bad for the entire market or the entire economy. But there's a general consensus slowly dissipating, but that is debt is a negative thing in the ultimate sense, but people tend to think of arguments in their minds in which there are some scenarios in which debt can be good. But I'm going to be making the case today of against debt and for a society that is completely rid of debt and rid of interest rates. Now, interest rates, I'm going to be referring to them in the sense that they are going to be the premium placed on solely money. A lot of people tend to tie in interest rates to goods that are going to be deferred in payments, but I wouldn't consider that an interest rate. I would just consider that a deferment in that actual good and the seller being compensated for that deferred payment. But interest rates are going to be in terms of the money itself that is being deferred for future payments of that same principal amount. So this is purely in terms of money. And I'm going to tie this into the broader depiction of debt in society and why I think for the free market, it is not a great thing. And it is not a good thing for that matter. And it's something that will put down the economy and will hold it back from progressing even further. I'm going to start off by giving you three scenarios, three individuals, and they have three different lifestyles. And we're going to see how their lifestyles affect the overall economy. So you have person number one. This person saves a lot of money. He doesn't consume everything he makes. He consumes a certain portion of what he makes, and the rest he decides to save it. What does he do with that savings? He decides to invest it. So he invests in the creation of new goods and services that aren't yet in the market. So this is what his savings does, and this is why savings are crucial in a free market or in any economy, because they allow for the creation of new goods and services. In contrast, person number two consumes everything he makes. Every dollar he earns, he consumes it. So he doesn't go into debt, but he doesn't save either. This person is contributing to the economy because he is spurring up demand from his side, and he is consuming all the goods that are being produced. All the producers are making their money. They're making their certain amount of profits. So this scenario is not bad, but it's also not great because there are no creation of new goods and services. So in this scenario, I would consider the economy relatively stable, where the prices stay stable, um, the the output stays stable, everything in terms of the economy stays relatively stable. So there aren't no massive creations in new goods and services, but there aren't also any losses. The economy isn't going down. And then you have person number three, who consumes more than what he produces. And how does he make that consumption? He does it through debt. So what this guy does is actually taking more away from the economy than he is producing, than he is putting back in. So you can see this guy taking away from the pie more than what he's putting in. And this is the problem with debt, is that it gives you this extra demand that's artificial. And so this person now has more money, but he isn't producing that much money because his whatever he's earning is obviously going to be less than whatever he's spending, and he makes up the rest with debt. So this person is effectively in the worst possible condition and is producing the worst harm for the market. And that is the production of goods and services, the amount of goods and services is actually decreasing. in the economy, and he is putting down the economy. So I think I've laid out these three scenarios here in which one person who saves money, so he has a positive flow, net positive cash flow essentially for himself. And then on the complete opposite side of that spectrum, you have somebody who has a net negative cash flow. And that negative cash flow is represented by his consumption of debt, his utilization of debt. And if you apply this on a broader sense to an economy rather than just looking at it individuals, it starts to make sense. An economy that saves uses those savings to invest, and those investments allow for the creation of new goods and services. Because ultimately, the new creation of goods and services that a company needs to create comes from savings, comes from investors. Whatever the company does to produce its own goods and services and the profits that it makes all gets distributed throughout the company. It gets distributed to the workers, it gets distributed to the owners. And so what the company needs is its own source of income. It needs to have its own safe of cash. And where does it get that safe of cash? Not from the goods and services that it's producing and the revenue that it's generating, but in fact, it's actually getting it from investors. Investors are what allows the company to grow and to create new goods and services. How does that happen? It happens through savings. And without that savings, you see what happens. The company cannot produce any new goods and services. Now, an economy that does not save but also does not bet isn't in a bad condition, but it also isn't doing something to better improve the economy and to better grow the economy. It's sort of at a standstill in which nobody's going into debt. No, the economy isn't going into debt. Goods and services that are in the economy are not decreasing more than they are increasing, but they also aren't increasing more than they are decreasing. So, as I said, they're sort of at a standstill. And then the worst case scenario is an economy that's in debt. So, a lot of these companies are now, and it mostly starts off at an individual level where individuals borrow more than they consume. So, they take out from the economy, they create this artificial demand to take up and to consume goods and services that are produced. Now, there are also people who are loaning them this amount of money. And those people, unfortunately, instead of investing that money into companies, they are squandering it essentially, and they're giving it to people to bid up prices through this artificial demand. So instead of someone who has some savings investing it into a company, they instead give it to someone so that that person can go into debt. And it ultimately will backfire because that person will bring up the demand. They will take out more goods and services from the economy, which will drive up prices. So, and then in that scenario, ultimately the number of savers will over time decrease. And as you see this in the economy today, the more you use debt, the more you consume debt, the more society becomes accustomed to debt, the less savings there are. And this is just a phenomena of the economy and of the free market. So I think I've made an argument against debt. It's very simple, it's very basic, it's very macro. I tried to get it micro with the three individuals, but you could blow it up and look at it from a larger scale. And I think there really is no benefit besides, yes, you know, somebody could buy something that they can't afford, but I don't see how that's a positive thing. If somebody could think of a positive to debt and why we need to have a debt structure, and some people like to point to fractional reserve banking, well, what if we just throw that out the window too? Why not get rid of fractional reserve banking? Let banks do what banks did for thousands of years, and that is just to store your savings, to store it, sort of like a security vault. That's all banks should do. Now, some could argue, why can't banks then invest money? Well, then they aren't banks anymore. They're more investors or investing institutions. They're not. I wouldn't consider them a bank. But a bank, in the most basic terms, is something that stores your value, and it does it through security. right? It has a security system. It transports your money from vault to vault, and it essentially acts as one big vault. But unfortunately, that's not how banks operate today. Right now, banks have their own business models. They have their own ways of investing. They've moved away from storing your wealth to now investing your wealth, and now they don't even have an incentive to save and preserve your wealth. They actually are incentivized to make as risky of investments as possible because they know that the Fed will bail them out. They know that the federal government will quickly replenish everybody's savings in that bank account, um, and then bring back the money to the people. So this removes all liabilities from the bank. So if we get rid of the fractional reserve banking, I really don't see any case where debt can be justified and can be shown to produce a really good positive for the economy. And again, I see debt as artificial demand. You get true demand from savings, but debt produces artificial demand, and you essentially squander and destroy people's savings because instead of people saving and investing their savings into businesses or even saving so that they can buy more expensive, more luxurious goods and services in the future, they instead squander it and give it to someone who then consumes more into the economy, which will again lower the amount of goods and services in the economy and bid up prices. So that'll be it for this episode. It's a bit short, but I wanted to get straight to the point. And if anybody has any arguments, if anybody wants to leave any comments, leave it in my YouTube channel. It's just the same, the Golden Question, and it's the videos are clearly listed out. It's just the episode number and then the title of the video or the name of the podcast, the question of the podcast. And so leave your questions and thoughts and concerns in the bottom, and I'll try to get back into them, even maybe making a new video addressing them. So thanks for watching. As always, stay safe.